You hit it, you stab the woman. Really? You're just gonna, all of them? No, you can't kill that, it's a gazebo. You hit, kill, you maim, you slay. Yes, it dies. It's dead. Dies. Dead. 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 It's dead. They're all dead. Everybody is dead. Hello, my name is Guy, and you're watching How to Be a Great GM. And we are talking about that rather irritating type of group of players known as Murder-Hobos. And in particular, we're looking at 10 solutions that you can use in order to, kill the Murder-Hobo in your game, because ultimately that's what we'd really like to do to them, isn't it? Murder-Hobos. So, before we get started, however, with the 10 steps on how to get rid of Murder-Hobos in your game, we've got to first look at what causes Murder-Hobos. Now, initially, you might sit back and go, they're a bunch of barbaric savages known as players, and that's what causes Murder-Hobos? Well, there's much more to it than that. And unfortunately, there's a large component which is your fault. Yep, that's right. So, let's have a look. Now, Murder-Hobos from the player's side. Yes, the players are 9 times out of 10. Well, let's say 9.9 times out of 10. Well, 9.99999 times out of 10 it's their fault, really. Except for the 10 out of 10 times it's your fault. But 9 out of 10 times it's the player's fault. And the reason for that is because they've created a one-dimensional character. They don't have any depth to them, so they just hit and kill stuff. That's what they do. Well, you can already see that the fault there is unfortunately sitting on the GM. You should have got them to create more in-depth backstories. You should have worked with those backstories a bit more, perhaps. So, I digress. Now, another thing that the players can do is that they have limited thinking. Maybe they come from a video game environment where pretty much your goal is to kill everything that you can attack. And sometimes you can kill stuff that you shouldn't attack, but you can still win if you're super powerful. So sometimes the players just don't know that there is an alternative. Again, that comes from, let's not blame the GM for everything. This one is pretty much on the players. If that's them. They could also have a disconnect with the game. If they don't really like the game, if they're bored, if they just feel like the pacing is wrong and there's nothing for them to do, they can hit stuff out of frustration and boredom. Now, that's definitely not a GM's problem. No, all right. So yes, they can become disconnected from the game, which is what causes them to run around and hit stuff. If they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, or if they don't have a clear objective, well, sometimes hitting stuff gets things rolling. Then there could be a lack of understanding of how to actually play the game. That there is definitely room for talk, because the NPCs themselves don't talk. They just hit back straight away. So those are some of the reasons why players become Murder-Hobos. Of course, there's always the one, players just like killing things and use this as a video game type platform. That is squarely and solely on the player's side. That's something that they want to do, that's something that they like. And so yes, alright, that is totally a player's mistake. The rest of it, however, could potentially have led back to the GM maybe not asking the right questions, or maybe not prompting for the right type of actions. Far too often as GMs will sit back and go, my players are a disaster. Oh, I had such a horrid game. Oh, it was bad. It was so bad. The players didn't do this, they didn't do that. It was so bad. What did you do to change the player's mindset, or to even explore what the player's mindset was first before trying to change it, or just declaring that they're Murder-Hobos? Now, when we look at the GM's side of things that can cause Murder-Hoboing to occur, well, Unreasonable NPCs set the tone. I'll never forget. I had a player once who stood up from my table and said, I'm not playing with you anymore. Your NPCs are all lawful evil and will betray us at the first opportunity that they get. And indeed, I used to think I was very clever. Oh yes, this NPC that you're trading with and giving all that wonderful information to, they're going to sell it out to the nearest bidder and watch as your corpse burns on the flames. So I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes we engender actually require our players to kill pretty much everyone because, well, pretty much everyone's out to kill them. So, if you're a GM and you have a tendency to have your NPCs turn or betray the players, you could be causing your own Murder-Hobo problem. NPCs who routinely backstab. Very similar kind of idea. You have to have NPCs that are varied and different. And if your NPCs are all cold, aloof, and non-engaging individuals, or who are all boring and dull and don't have backstories, well, why the hell should the players talk to them? It's much easier to cut their heads off. Makes sense in my mind anyway. No consequence for actions. Oh yeah, you killed the blacksmith. Well, the town guard come up to you, but then they back away because they realize that you're just too powerful. Guess what's going to happen in a world like that? Where the villagers don't react to someone murdering someone, or where the town guard back off because they're intimidated, someone's going to complain to a lord somewhere that there is this bunch of psychopaths moving through cities and villages, murdering and pillaging, and not having any kind of consequence. The lord will hire more powerful NPCs to deal with that problem. But if there are no consequences, that is a big failing on the GM's behalf. And you might not want to appear unpopular in front of your players by making hard decisions. Well, if you're going to let them run rampant, you can't complain about it. That's the last point. GMs who don't put down some kind of authority. Guys, if you're going to kill everything, that's a different type of game, and I'll shift to playing that game, but we're not role-playing anymore. If you don't set the boundaries, if you don't set the benchmarks and talk to your players about changing their ways, well, then really the fault is your own, isn't it? And it is a difficult conversation to have. I hate having it with players. I really do. I really do. But if you don't, then it's seen as being the acceptable course of action, in which case then they realize they profit more from doing that than they do from talking. So they'll just start killing everything. All right, so those are some of the issues that can arise or cause murder hoboing to happen within your game. And I've spoken a little bit about some of the solutions that this video purports to have. Now, these solutions are things that I've tried in my own games, and, well, they have worked, generally speaking, except for the player who is just there to kill stuff. They don't care about the story, they don't care about the character, they just want the satisfaction of knowing that they defeated a completely imaginary foe in a completely imaginary battle where they are completely imaginarily successful. So those kind of people, there is really nothing you can do about it, and my advice there is if you're not a Murder Hobo GM and you want to actually have a story and NPCs that make a difference, they need to be excused from the group and you need to find a replacement. It's as easy as that. That is the only case, I think, where murder hoboing will result in that kind of thing. Otherwise, usually it's just miscommunication or lack of information. So, without further ado, let's move on to my 10 ways in which I used to try and murder my murder hobos. Now, number 1. Consequences. I spoke about this briefly as we looked at what happens if there aren't any consequences. Those consequences need to be severe, and if your world has murderers being executed, the party needs to be sent to the gallows. Now, I'm not saying that you are going to kill the entire party. That will just make your players very unhappy with you. They won't understand why, they'll be confused, etc., etc. It gives you, however, a great opportunity to teach your players that as they're being led to the gallows, as they're sitting in the dungeon unable to escape because you didn't watch the video on how to run prison escapes properly, but as they sit there and they're in trouble, have another character, an NPC, walk in, a kindly jailer, a washerwoman who takes pity on them because they didn't understand what they're doing. Well, if you lads go around killing everybody, you're bound to get killed yourselves. Live by the sword, die by the sword. Have you tried talking recently? You've talked to me and you haven't cut my head off. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, yeah, you don't have a weapon to do it, but if you did, would you really have cut my head off? So you can explain in-game how it should work. Give them a break. If they do it a second time round, however, squash them with a meteor. Now, something else that you can do, which is similar to consequences, bounty hunters. You can launch bounty hunters against the party and put up wanted posters around the city. Have you seen this group of people? Do not approach them. They are heavily armed and dangerous. They have killed 5, 10, 15, 20, however many people they have managed to actually slaughter. So you can show them that the world is watching and that the world is about to strike. It is about to do something. And if they still continue to persist, have these bounty hunters come along and wreak havoc. Kill 1 or 2 players' characters. No one will really miss that. They'll understand why it happened, and hopefully it'll be a lesson to teach them. These are very rod and stick kind of approaches, of course. There are other ways of doing it, and these are not necessarily the best ways. That's why I've listed them first. Now, the problem that you might have, I've sent 10 guards to try and teach them a lesson, and they just killed all 10 guards. So then I sent them a wizard, and they killed the wizard. You are the GM. Your characters have infinite hit points. It's all make-believe. Just remember that. So if you send a bunch of guards against the party and they slaughter the guards to the man, the Lord will hire better and bigger guards who have more hit points and more hit points and more hit points. Do not let the mechanics stop you as the game master from proving a point about the way the game is being played. So just give the characters infinite hit points that are fighting the enemy, or give them so many hit points that it doesn't matter. However you want to justify it. Don't be afraid to use narrative power to teach a lesson, or to change the mindset, or to show a way that might be a better game option. Now, something that I should, as I pause here before I move on to the next point, don't be afraid to run a Murder-Hobo game. If you like a Murder-Hobo campaign and you have players who like killing stuff, then this video is not for you. This video is all about how to correct that kind of behavior if you think it's wrong. If you think it's right, well, have fun, good luck, and off you go. There's other channels that have got lots of videos on stats and points and stuff that you can go and watch. So just bear that in mind. This video is only if you think murder-hoboing is bad. All right, so now number 4. I think, yes, number 4, is shunned and hated. They walk into town, everyone closes up shop, no one will deal with them. It's a passive-aggressive way of trying to teach them that if they get a reputation for killing people, no one's going to want to deal with them. Also, you can have shady characters approaching them. Oh, I like what you did there, son. Ruthless, bloody, deadly. Look, I want to hire you to please go over to the blacksmith. I want you to rape his daughter repeatedly. And then when you're done, can you behead her and stick her head on a pike in front of her father's door? If the players are going to be brutal and savage, be brutal and savage back. Make them realize that their actions are being seen as ridiculously barbaric and horrendously murderous. Let them realize what they're doing. So it's not so much a brute force as it is a subtle suggestion and reminder that they are having a major consequence on the world. Now, if we move away from consequence, we can start to look at actually talking to your players. Maybe that should be number 1. But I generally find that if you ask players outright, their answers will be vague and aloof, and they'll try and avoid the actual answer. But speak to them and ask them what type of campaign they want. If they want to just kill stuff, well, then that's what you've got to decide. Do you give them that, or do you find a different group? So you can just speak to them and say, guys, look, I'm having difficulty here because you're just killing everybody that's supposed to give you information or any useful, valuable item. So I'm not sure what you want me to do as the GM. If I'm just running stat blocks, that's fine, and then you turn it into a tabletop simulator and you use battle rules from the D&D attack wing system, because that's great. It does exactly what you need to do. You can also try to have more balanced NPCs. Now, as we said, some of the causes of murder-hobos are the fact that the NPCs are either too aggressive or not aggressive enough, or that they do this or they do that. So that's something that you can think about, is if you have more balanced NPCs, some are timid, some are afraid, some ask for help, some refuse help, some are aggressive, some are evil. By mixing up your NPCs, it mixes up the interactions that the PCs have with them. Now you might sit back and go, oh, I've got NPCs and they're varied and they're all, and I do accents for them, they're wonderful. If at the base, however, they all turn out to be the same, they all betray the party, they all do this, they all do that, then they're not that different. So what you have to sit back at and look at is, are your NPCs fundamentally different? Are you using the 7 personality types to maybe create varied NPCs, some that are aggressive, some that are diplomatic, etc., etc.? Because if you're not, then those encounters could be very boring and the players just want to get through them as quickly as they can. By becoming a murder-hobo, they're effectively hitting the skip button on the dialogue option of your NPC interaction, and nobody wants that. You set the tone. That's right, you set the tone. You guide the party, which is what we've really been talking about. But you set the tone. So if your NPCs are overly aggressive, or if they always attack, goblins are always evil, orcs are always attacking bloodthirsty hordes, that's what the players are going to do, and that's how they're going to respond. They're not even going to give them a second chance to sit back and look. And I wouldn't even call them murder hobos at that point. I would call them people who live in the real world and whose world, as far as they have seen it, has been presented as a savage, aggressive space. So you also control that tone. Set it correctly and you won't have murder hobos. But if you don't set it, or if you let them get away with it, then that's what's going to be set. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Now, you can educate the PCs directly. Rather than going the subtle route, the avoiding conflict route, you can actually educate them directly. And I will be releasing a video tomorrow on Are You a Murder Hobo? And that will look at the players' problems of being murder hobos and how they can avoid them and change their ways so that they're not murder hobos. So you can educate your players and say, guys, look, just watch this video and do you think it applies to you? Because I'm having difficulty. Remember, bring it back to not you are the problem, not you are the murder hobo, but bring it back to you as the GM. You are having difficulty in terms of telling the story because the characters keep attacking. Is it because of your mistakes, your etc., etc., etc.? So you can just educate the players as well. Sometimes the players don't know that there isn't an alternative. They come from a computer game or console game environment where you just hit and kill everything you come across, except the stuff that you actually physically can't do because it's been hard-coded that way. So if that's what they come from, well, then you can do the same thing. Hard-code some of your NPCs to just be immortal and they can't attack them. You can give them a house. Now, this is something that I haven't spoken about at all in this entire video, the hobo part of murder. Murder hobos just move through the world destroying, maiming, plundering and pillaging. They don't really have a fixed base. They don't do this, they don't do that. Who's the fault that they don't have a base? Squarely, that sits on the GM's shoulders. If you haven't given them an opportunity to settle down, then that's their fault. If you have given them an opportunity to settle down and they have chosen not to, well, now that starts to lead us back to educating the players. It starts to question maybe it wasn't right for them. Maybe that's not the type of campaign they want. But if you give them a home, and so many GMs are terrified of giving players a base. Give them an operation point for their characters to work from. It really isn't that difficult. It's not that traumatic and it doesn't lead to as many problems as you think it leads to. It gives them a singular spot. It gives you a pressure point that you can put in the learning. You can threaten that space if they start murdering people and they just keep running away from the law. Well, maybe the law now commandeers their castle. So you can really, really use that to your advantage. But if you give them a place, give them a point, give them NPCs, and that's my next point, is give them NPCs that they can invest in, that run these homes, run these estates for them, and that have interactions in the village. Give them the opportunities to not be hobos. Give them the opportunity to settle down and to start investing in the local area. Now, we're not talking suddenly it must become Downton Abbey episodes and everyone just talks about upstairs, downstairs. Not at all. We are talking about having the PCs have a central point that gives them reference, that gives them a reason to invest in the world. Remember, one of the things that we said was that the players have become disconnected from the game. Well, maybe it's because they don't have a home. I certainly know when I moved to Japan, the very first thing I wanted to do was settle down, get my apartment, get my roots up, get everything sorted so that I could feel like I was settled. And it took a month and a month of living in hotels. I didn't feel like I really belonged. I was sort of waiting for my trip home type of thing until I got my apartment, and now I'm home and now I don't want to ever leave. So the idea is to give them a strong base and to give them people that they want to interact with. Again, murder hobos are difficult if they are simply there because they want to kill stuff. If, however, they're there because, well, they don't know any other, or you've set the tone, that can be easily corrected with a few of these little adjustments to your gaming style, and you are golden. Your party are no longer going to run around killing everybody. I hope this has been useful in some small way. Hit the like button if it has. Hit the subscribe button if you want to show support for the channel and you want us to continue doing what we do. And share some insight from your perspective on the whole murder hobo thing below. Tell us, how did you get rid of your murder hobos? And I'd love to see some of your thoughts and solutions on this rather tricky problem, which does crop up from time to time. Until next time, however, I wish you and yours the very happiest.